And so that brings up a lot of questions about, well, what do other people experience when, let's say, they don't even file for a separation or file for a divorce, and the other spouse sues for no fault? Is there a defense available? Because we're not talking about divorce in general. We're talking about, is there actually any legal protection if you get married? That there is some kind of standard by which allows you to get a divorce, but by which you must reach in order to get a divorce. Because if there's no standard, and someone can leave at will, I mean, we're talking about a legal status. We're not talking about relationship. I mean, someone can leave the household. You can't force them, pull them by the ear or anything like that. But we're talking about the legal status provided by the civil government. You are married. Can someone alter that legal status without any reason? That's the question. And what does that imply about all of the after effects, incidental effects of custody, of redistribution of wealth, of child support, of all these other consequential things that take place after the divorce? And one of the examples that I like to give is think about marriage and family as like a household, or it is a household, but you're in a house and you've got the doors locked with a padlock on it. Now, what no fault does, and particularly unilateral no fault, is it breaks the padlock. So there's no padlock on the door. And so you have all of these things inside the house. You've got, your wealth, your estate, your finances, you've got children, you've got your religious beliefs and obligations. You've got all these things that are protected within the boundaries of your house. But no fault, and so previous to no fault, you have to have some cause of action, some reason for the government to break into your house and then decide how to redistribute everything and control your life. With unilateral no fault divorce, essentially that padlock is no longer there. And so there's absolutely zero protection, which again, this allows the government to come in and do as they wish to you without having any legal defense against that underlying issue of divorce.
Yeah, it basically, you're exactly right with this. This is the same way I look at it too. With no fault divorce, they have essentially stripped every legal protection for the institution of marriage from you. So, I mean, I would go so far as to say that in states where there's no fault divorce, unilateral no fault divorce, divorce on demand, divorce for any reason, for no reason, divorce at will. I mean, this is really what it comes down to, is that we really don't have marriage anymore. We have a registered cohabitation, a voluntary sort of an arrangement, but marriage used to have much stronger ties to it. From a religious perspective, you have those ties, but from a civil perspective, as you said, it was a change of legal status. And in order to change that legal status, to go from single to married, two people had to enter into the marital union together, consent to it, and in many instances apply for a marriage license, and they had their legal status changed. So that was a bilateral sort of thing, and the state gave its blessing. But with unilateral no fault divorce, that your legal status can be altered simply by an allegation or by a whim for whatever reason, for no reason, and you can go from married to divorced. And it may go back to what happened in Bolshevik Russia with Vladimir Lenin. That was one of the things that he did. He instituted unilateral divorce because he wanted to bring communism into the society. And the first thing he had to do was attack the family. And, I think you see similar events happening right now, but perhaps you want to discuss that a little bit more, just the idea about the legal protection. And I really liked what you said about the padlock. What you've done is you've broken the padlock and you basically have invited all the criminals, the looters, the rioters to come on in and take anything they want. There's very little protection from that point on. And some of these people may be some of the attorneys that are there to defend you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raise a good point about the cultural and philosophical underpinnings of all of this, because it's no coincidence. It's no accident that we have rampant divorce and all of the things that are taking place in the family court systems. I mean, it's, people like to say, well, the culture has changed and all that kind of stuff. And to some degree, that's true. But part of that is the culture has changed because those who are in power have changed it through the legal system. And so, you raise a good point with Bolshevik Russia, when in the 1917 revolution in Russia, when it became communist, there was a stated goal to destroy the family, and they had all sorts of philosophical arguments to do so, and it was this idea that, well, the man is a patriarch, he exploits his wife, mankind is naturally polygamous, and so marriage puts restraints on and all this kind of crap. So in order to uphold the true nature of man, which is free love, and women being unbound by or no longer dependent on the financial support of their husbands, all of these kind of things took place. And I have here too, actually, because it wasn't just no-fault divorce that was introduced. And originally it was mutual no-fault, which then changed to unilateral no-fault. We see the same thing in the United States. We see abortion legalized in 1920. We see no-fault divorce introduced in 1918. We see sodomy decriminalized in 1922. So all of these things are just repeats in the United States during the sexual revolution. And it took place the same way. I mean, we had mutual no-fault divorce. Now there's essentially no state that doesn't have unilateral no-fault divorce. And what you do is you poison the well, because you say, well, some of these states still have other grounds for divorce that provide protections. But think of it this way. I mean, first of all, that's not necessarily true, because all of these states are erasing their books, and essentially the only ground that is left is unilateral no-fault divorce.
Right.
But even if those other grounds do exist on the books, as in the case with my parents in New York, they don't matter, because you're putting this exception clause or this nullification clause into the family code, essentially nullifying all of these other grounds. It's not like you actually have any standing with these other traditional grounds that, again, uphold morality, provide protections. Yes, they provide avenues for divorce, but there has to be some kind of threshold. Without a threshold, you're exactly right. Marriage is obsolete in terms of its civil institution. And, I like what Dr. Stephen Baskerville, one of the leading academics on this issue, says, is that he says, the religious and moral component, or the religious and moral content of marriage remains. There is still much value and importance in marriage. However, as a civil institution, it has been abolished through no-fault divorce.
Right.
So, when we say civil institution, we don't mean, well, there isn't value in marriage. What we're saying is there are no protections by which you're able to assert through in civil society.
Right.